Hi, my name's Evan, and this Thanksgiving, my parents called me a freak, then hosted dinner without me. No warning, no invite, just silence. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? They showed up a week later, smiling, with a real estate agent, trying to sell my home to my brother. They thought I'd roll over. They thought I was still that quiet kid who never fought back. What they didn't know was that I had everything watching. The cameras, the documents, the law. And when the sheriff walked through those lobby doors, their smiles didn't just fade, they cracked. You want to know what happens when family crosses a line they can't come back from? It's funny, in a bitter sort of way, how a single word can echo louder than a scream. Growing up, Thanksgiving always meant noise. Bickering over mashed potatoes, my dad grumbling about overcooked turkey, my brother trying to get out of dishes. And me? I was just there, present, breathing, smiling too much, maybe, staying quiet to keep the peace. But this year was different. No bickering, no food fights, no forced jokes over pumpkin pie. This year, I wasn't even invited. No text, no call, no email, nothing. Just silence. I found out from my sister's Instagram story. The table was set like always. Same china, same dry centerpiece Mom had used for the past 20 years. My chair was empty. There was no extra plate. No mention of me. That kind of exclusion doesn't come from forgetfulness. It comes from a decision. And decisions have roots. Old ones. I still remember the first time they used the word. I was 17, quiet, bookish, always looking at the world a little sideways. My mom had just caught me reading some essay I'd written about feeling disconnected from the family. Nothing scandalous, just honest. Too honest, I guess. "That's not how normal boys think," she said, tossing the pages on the counter. "You're such a freak sometimes." She didn't shout it. That would have been easier to process, maybe. No, she said it like a sigh. Like it was a fact she'd just discovered, and now everything made sense. They never took it back. It stuck, like gum on the bottom of a shoe. Every Thanksgiving after that, I felt it underfoot, no matter how many times I smiled or offered to help with the dishes. I wasn't angry back then. I was hopeful. Maybe next year they'd see me. Maybe if I tried harder. But you try hard long enough without return, and eventually something breaks. Sometimes it's your heart. Sometimes it's your silence. A few months ago, I bought the penthouse. Didn't tell anyone. No ribbon cutting, no social media post, just a quiet transaction. Cash. Mine. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. A soft place to land if or when I got cut off completely. Turns out, it came sooner than I thought. Now I stand here alone on Thanksgiving Day, barefoot on marble floors, glass of wine in hand, watching the ocean churn against the rocks below. The air smells like salt and independence. The walls are floor-to-ceiling windows, but I don't feel exposed. If anything, it's the first time I've felt safe in a long time. No one can burst in with accusations. No one can tell me what I should be, or how I embarrass them, or why I'm always too sensitive. the only voices in this place are mine and the waves. Behind me, the light casts my reflection faintly onto the balcony door. I pause, wine glass just beneath my chin. The man looking back at me seems older than he should be, not in years, but in knowing, in holding it together for too long. I don't look broken, but I don't look whole either. The truth is, they didn't stop inviting me because I caused trouble. I never did. I made myself small, agreeable. I was the easy child, the one who didn't ask for much, the one who didn't need rescuing. They took my silence as confirmation that I didn't need space at the table. Because if you don't fight for your place, they assume you don't belong. I remember birthdays where I got socks while my brother got concert tickets. I remember being praised for not complaining. "That's what we love about you," they'd say. "You're low maintenance." What they meant was, "You don't make us uncomfortable." They loved me as long as I was invisible. Tonight, I didn't dress up, didn't try to replicate some Norman Rockwell fantasy. I ate what I wanted. Took a walk along the shore without pretending my feet weren't freezing. I didn't have to nod through a conversation about politics or listen to my uncle crack jokes that made my skin crawl. And still, there's an ache. Not for them, for what I thought I had. I'm not bitter, not tonight. But there's a line I keep coming back to, a quiet truth that settled into my bones. This was never about Turkey, or traditions, or even misunderstandings. This was about permission. They never believed I'd choose myself. They thought I'd keep showing up with a smile, pretending like the cracks weren't getting wider. They were wrong. I chose silence too, but mine wasn't surrender. Mine was strategy. They thought silence meant surrender, but they had no idea what I had already built without them. I took another sip of wine and set the glass down on the kitchen counter. The sky outside had darkened completely, swallowing the last orange smear of the sunset. The waves kept rolling in, steady and unrushed, just like they had before, and just like they would tomorrow. It was late now, well past the hour dinner would have been cleared at my parents' house. That house. I could picture it even without looking. The same dim lighting, the heavy drapes drawn too early, the sound of utensils clinking against plates. I could imagine my dad pushing his chair back with that familiar grunt, my mom handing off leftovers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And I could hear my name not being mentioned. I knew that silence better than any word. Growing up, being the youngest came with rules, unspoken ones. You don't speak up. You don't ask for more. You don't cause waves. They called it being easy, low maintenance. My mom liked to brag about me to her friends. He never needed much, never gave us any trouble. And I didn't, because the second I tried, I was labeled dramatic, difficult, ungrateful. So I stayed in my lane. I gave them what they wanted, obedience disguised as maturity. They praised me for not needing help, then used that as an excuse to give me less. It started small. I got the smallest room, the hand-me-down phone, the borrowed car. "You're good at making things work," they'd say, while my siblings got support, attention, backup plans. It wasn't just about things. It was about space, emotional space. They made decisions for me without asking. They assumed I'd go along. Thanksgiving was always the same. I'd help clean, run errands, keep my mouth shut while someone else drank too much or picked a fight. I wasn't thanked. I was expected. I was the buffer, the fixer, never the favorite. And still, I showed up. Every year I put on a nice shirt, drove down, and acted like being included meant being valued. But I was never the one they toasted, never the one whose stories they asked to hear. I was a placeholder, a warm body to keep the chairs full. I was always there, but never expected to belong. I walked to the fridge, opened it, and stared for a moment. It was full. Charcuterie I'd picked up earlier, leftovers from a catered dinner I ordered instead of cooking. Not out of laziness, out of choice. I'd built this life on choices, ones no one in my family ever asked about. No one ever said, "Where are you living these days?" No one ever asked, "Are you happy?" They didn't know I'd moved out of state, didn't ask when I changed jobs, didn't wonder why I stopped replying so quickly. And when I stopped showing up last year, just once, they acted like I'd committed a crime. The part that still catches in my throat? They didn't ask what was wrong. They just filled in the blanks with their own assumptions. He's busy. He's distant. He's selfish. But not one of them asked what I wanted. That's when I knew. I could disappear from their lives completely, and it wouldn't be grief they felt. It would be inconvenience. I glanced around the penthouse, the clean, sharp lines, the quiet lighting, the art on the walls I'd chosen myself. The paperwork for the purchase was locked away in my desk drawer. The deed was in my name. No cosigner, no handout. I bought this place without fanfare. No, "guess what I did" phone calls. No family group texts with proud photos. I didn't share because I didn't want to hear the disbelief, or worse, the entitlement. If they knew I had this, they'd ask, "Why didn't you tell us?" Not out of joy for me, out of annoyance that I hadn't looped them in. Because in their minds, everything I had was still theirs to approve. I'd learned the hard way. The more visible I was, the more they tried to control. So I made myself invisible, on purpose. And now that I had something real, something mine, I wasn't handing it over for validation. Not this time. They didn't cut me out by mistake. They didn't forget me. They calculated that I'd stay quiet, that I'd do what I always did, show up, play nice, swallow my questions. But tonight, alone in this space I built with my own two hands, I felt something shift. I didn't feel like explaining myself anymore. I didn't need to. There was a calm in that thought, not a bitter one, just final. I leaned against the edge of the counter and stared at the soft glow of the city lights beyond the glass. I could have sat there all night, maybe even gone to bed with a quiet sense of peace, if not for the phone. It buzzed once, then again. I turned it over. A message from my mother. 3 words. Thinking of you. Polite, short, timed like always. Too late to come to dinner, just early enough to ease her conscience. I didn't open it. I didn't need to, because I already knew. The message wasn't an apology. It was an opening move. I didn't reply. Not right away. I let the message sit there, untouched. I went about my weekend, cleaned the kitchen, took long walks by the beach, ran errands that didn't need running. Every time I picked up my phone, I saw those 3 words blinking in the notification banner. Thinking of you. It read like a sympathy card from someone who caused the damage and didn't want to say how. 2 days later, on Monday morning, I was pouring myself a second cup of coffee when my phone finally rang. Her name lit up the screen. Mom. I didn't rush to answer it. I let it ring a few times. Then I picked it up. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, too brightly. "I didn't catch you at a bad time, did I?" That's how it started. A soft tone, carefully measured. But it didn't fool me. I'd heard that voice before, whenever she needed something but didn't want to admit it. "No," I said. "I'm fine." There was a pause, just long enough to make it awkward. "We missed you this weekend," she continued. "The table felt smaller without you." That was rich. The table had felt smaller because they'd said it that way. I didn't answer right away. She kept going. "I thought maybe we could talk. Just talk. I don't want tension in the family." There it was. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "we were wrong." Just, "let's not make things messy." She added, "Families go through rough patches, you know that. We all make mistakes." Mistakes. Like forgetting to invite your son to Thanksgiving dinner. Like calling him a freak years ago and pretending it never happened. But still, no ownership. No mention of what they did, only what I might have misinterpreted. Kindness without accountability. I stayed quiet, giving her room to fill the silence. She did. "Your brother's been under a lot of stress lately," she said too quickly. "With the market the way it is, the pressure's been intense. He's thinking about a new place, something more stable." There it was. She hadn't called to reconnect. She hadn't called because she missed me. This was about him. As soon as his name slipped out, I could see the structure behind her call. The pieces lined up like a jigsaw puzzle. Stress, future, stability, need. She was planting seeds. "I told him you've always had a good head on your shoulders," she went on. "And you've built something for yourself, quietly, gracefully. You've always been independent. The rest of us, well, we get a little messy sometimes." That was her version of flattery, making me sound like a monk who didn't need anything, so they could justify asking for something. "We were thinking," she added, with that faux casual drawl, "maybe we could stop by sometime, just to visit. No pressure." Visit. As in, come into the home they didn't know I had, look around, make conversation, suggest things, comment on the view, say how perfect it would be for a family, for someone like my brother. She didn't have to say the rest. I could hear it in the pause. "You don't need all this space. You've always been independent. He needs it more than you." I felt my shoulders tighten. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. That call wasn't a white flag. It was a land survey. They wanted access, not connection. And here's the thing. Part of me, an older, deeper part, almost leaned in. That familiar instinct flared up, the one trained to make things easier for everyone else. The one that used to say yes before the question was even finished. Fixer, buffer, quiet solution. But something in me stayed still. Something that had spent 2 full days sitting with silence and realizing it didn't hurt anymore. She kept waiting. I could hear her smile, struggling on the other end of the line. Finally, I said, "I'll think about it." That was all. No challenge, no fight, no list of everything they'd done wrong. Just 5 calm words. And somehow, it rattled her more than if I'd yelled. Her voice tightened. "Well, okay then. Let us know. You know your father worries." That was a lie, but I let it pass. We ended the call without fanfare. No "love you," no "talk soon," just a click. Then silence. Afterward, I sat there for a moment, phone in hand, staring at the dark screen. Then I stood up, walked across the room, and tapped the tablet by the front door. My security app loaded, displaying each camera angle: front entrance, garage, elevator lobby. Everything was quiet. Still, I watched for a moment longer, because something in me had stirred again. Not fear, not anger. Preparedness. They thought the conversation had gone their way, but they had already underestimated how much I was paying attention. The first sign came the next morning. A message from Mom, shorter this time, clipped in tone, missing the fluff she usually sprinkled in when she wanted something. "Just checking in. Let us know when's a good time." No punctuation, no warmth. I didn't respond. I gave it space. 12 hours later, another message followed. This one had a polite tone again, but it felt rushed, like she typed it out while waiting in line at a store. "Would love to hear your voice. Dad says hi." Dad never says hi through text. It was subtle, but I recognized it. The cadence of someone who thought time and repetition could wear you down. Each message sent just close enough together to suggest concern, but just frequent enough to feel like pressure. By the third day, they stopped waiting. I was cleaning out the kitchen cabinets that afternoon, something I'd been meaning to do for weeks, when my phone buzzed. Not a message, a call. I didn't recognize the number until it connected and I heard his voice. My father. "Why are you making this difficult?" he asked before I could even say hello. He didn't bother pretending it was a check-in. "This doesn't have to become something it's not," he added, his tone sharp, like he was warning a contractor who'd missed a deadline. I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to hear how far he'd go. "We've always tried to include you," he said, "but now you're acting like we did something to you." I almost laughed. Almost. "You didn't do anything," I replied. "You just left me out." Silence on his end. Then, "We didn't think you'd mind. You're always doing your own thing." Right, because I'd learned to keep quiet, to keep busy, to not rely on them. That had become their excuse to treat me like an afterthought. He kept pushing. "Your brother's been under real stress. The house situation. He's overwhelmed. And you, well, you've always been the one with the head on straight. You don't fall apart like he does." There it was again. Praise as manipulation. The strong one card. They'd played it for years. Every time someone else needed help or made a mess, I was the solid one, the easy one, the one they never had to check on, so they never did. I drew in a breath and exhaled slowly. "Look," I said, "I'm not coming by. Not right now." He didn't take it well. "This isn't just about you. You have responsibilities too." That word. responsibilities. It always came up when they needed something from me. Not love, not care. Obligation. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "I've made my decision." That was it. No justifications, no list of past offenses. I left the sentence hanging, final and clean. He ended the call a moment later. No goodbye, just a click. The air felt heavier after that, like the room had swallowed the tension and didn't know what to do with it. I paced for a while, then made tea I didn't drink. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the cabinets I hadn't finished organizing. And that old instinct kicked in. Smooth it over. Keep the peace. But I didn't act on it. I let it sit there, uncomfortable and unfinished, just like the conversation. Instead, I stood up, walked across the room, and pulled out the security panel by the hallway door. I scrolled through the live camera feeds, the building entrance, the elevator lobby, my hallway. Nothing looked unusual, but still, I adjusted a few settings, changed notification parameters, shared temporary access with my lawyer, just for awareness, not alarm. I wasn't being paranoid. I knew the pattern, the soft asks, the sudden pressure, the guilt, the gaslighting. And when that didn't work, the visits. They'd done it before, showed up by coincidence, called from the driveway, said they were just in the neighborhood. Sometimes they brought my brother with them, sometimes not. It wasn't a family reunion. It was surveillance disguised as concern. That evening, I grilled salmon on the stovetop and played soft jazz through the ceiling speakers. I tried to act like it was a normal night. But just before dinner, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my father. 4 words. "We'll be in your area soon." No question, no emoji, no explanation. They weren't waiting for permission. They weren't even pretending anymore. That was the moment I understood. They weren't asking anymore. It was nearly 1 in the morning when I finally turned off the lights, but the room didn't go dark. The moon, full and unapologetic, spilled its light through the glass walls of the penthouse. The ocean outside roared louder than usual, as if it sensed the shift in the air, the tension pressing down like humidity before a storm. I lay there, eyes open, listening to the sound of waves pounding against the shoreline. Steady, relentless. The same rhythm I'd grown up hearing from the inside of my parents' house. Only now, I was hearing it without the filter of someone else's rules, or moods, or expectations. It should have felt like peace, but it didn't. The silence in my apartment didn't calm me, it cornered me. Without the noise, the distractions, the messages and calls to push away, I was left with memories. Not the loud ones, the ones that came dressed like help. I remembered the soft betrayals, the ones that looked like favors, the ones that started with, "We just thought you wouldn't mind," or "You're so good at handling things." I saw them clearly now. The checks I wrote without being asked, the loans I gave that were never returned, the times I canceled plans, rearranged my life, swallowed my own pride just to keep everyone else upright. Each one felt small at the time. Each one felt like a decision I'd made freely. But in the dark, with no one else around, I finally saw the pattern. It wasn't sacrifice. It was erosion. Piece by piece, I had whittled myself down to be useful. I sat up in bed, rubbed my hands over my face, stared at the phone on my nightstand. One call could smooth this all over. That's what I told myself. I didn't want an apology anymore. I didn't even want them to understand. I just wanted the pressure to stop. The looks, the guilt, the little manipulations disguised as family values. I wanted the silence between us to be something other than a standoff. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. My mother's name sat there in my recent calls like an old splinter I never bothered to remove. I pictured her answering, her voice too sweet, too high-pitched. I pictured the way she'd say, "See, I knew you'd come around." And suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore, because I knew what came next. One more call meant one more request. One more visit meant one more dinner where I'd be asked to just keep the peace. One more favor for my brother. One more dinner where I'd be seated near the end of the table while they praised him for simply showing up. I set the phone back down. There was no grand decision, no thunderclap of realization, just a quiet, firm line drawn in my mind. Not again. Not this time. I walked out to the kitchen, pondered a glass of water, and stood by the balcony door, watching the ocean churn in silver and shadow. The air smelled faintly of salt and jasmine from the planters I kept near the windows. The penthouse was still. My body was still. But my mind was burning. It hurt more than I expected. Not because I missed them, but because I finally stopped pretending I didn't. I whispered to no one, "I don't want to hate them." And I meant it. I wanted distance. I wanted clarity. But hate? No. That would have made them the center of my story again. I leaned my forehead against the glass and closed my eyes. This wasn't fear. This was grief. For the years I'd spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. It didn't mean I was weak. It meant I was awake. I returned to bed, tried to rest. A soft chime broke the silence, one I hadn't heard before. I grabbed my phone and checked the security app. One notification. No alarm, just activity. Someone had entered the front lobby of the building. The name logged didn't match any of my regular contacts. I sat upright, tapped into the camera feed. A figure stood at the reception desk, back turned to the lens. Too far to identify. A guest pass had been issued, but I hadn't approved one. My heart didn't race. Not exactly, but my body went alert. I clicked the app to freeze the feed, studied the name listed. Someone I'd never met. It didn't matter. I knew enough. That was when I realized waiting was no longer enough. It was 2 days later, late morning, when the line they'd been inching toward was finally crossed. I had just made coffee and was moving toward my desk when my phone buzzed. A push notification from the security system. At first glance, it seemed routine. Entry registered at the front desk. But something about the timing made me stop. I tapped the notification and opened the app. The lobby camera feed came into view. There they were, my parents. They weren't alone. Next to them stood a man in a dark blazer, clean-shaven, mid-40s maybe, businesslike, holding a folder under one arm and a clipboard in the other. He wasn't looking around like a guest. He wasn't waiting for anyone to greet him. He looked like he was here to conduct something. I didn't move. I just stood there, holding my phone, feeling something cold settle under my skin. The camera angle panned as they stepped forward to speak with the front desk staff. My father gestured toward the elevators. My mother adjusted her scarf, the way she always did when she was nervous, but pretending not to be. The man with them said nothing. He just waited, professional and still, like this wasn't his first time doing this kind of thing. I zoomed in slightly. Clipboard, thin manila folder, a logo in the top left corner. It took me a second to register it, but once I did, my stomach knotted. A local real estate firm, one I knew. One that dealt exclusively in luxury listings and evaluations. I didn't panic. I didn't throw on a jacket and storm downstairs. I didn't call the front desk. Instead, I pulled the camera footage back a few minutes, confirmed their entry time, took a screenshot of the three of them standing side by side, and sat down. Because it was clear now. They hadn't come to talk. They hadn't even called ahead. There was no message. No, "we're in town." No attempt to coordinate a visit. Not even the bare courtesy of pretending this was about reconnecting. They came to make moves. On my home. I flipped to another angle. A better view of the clipboard as the man opened it, held it slightly sideways for my father to glance at. Page 1. A property map. My building's floor plan. My unit. I took more screenshots, close-ups where I could, logged the date, saved the video file. I didn't feel rage, not even shock, just confirmation. A sharp, efficient kind of clarity that settled where panic might have lived if I hadn't been expecting something like this. I'd told myself they wouldn't cross this line, that there was still some part of them that respected boundaries, at least legal ones. But here they were, inviting a realtor, possibly an appraiser, into my building, without telling me, without asking. Acting as if my property was a family asset. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't need to. Confrontation would have given them what they wanted, my attention, my reaction, something they could twist later. "We were just looking. It was just a conversation. You're blowing this out of proportion." No, this time I'd let the facts speak. My phone vibrated again. A call. My father's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a second, then let it ring out. Voicemail followed. A few seconds passed before the notification popped up. I put in earbuds and listened. His voice was measured, like someone who'd rehearsed every word before hitting record. "Hey, we're just handling something important. You'll understand later. It's about the future. About keeping things stable. Your brother's going through a lot. This is a chance for everyone to move forward." No mention of asking, no hint of regret, just a statement. Like a decision had already been made, and I was simply a detail to be informed later. It wasn't even masked well. They weren't coming for a visit. They were looking to leverage. I stared out the window for a long time. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the one who didn't stir the pot, the one who made space for everyone else to have their say. And they mistook that for silence. But silence, when intentional, becomes strategy. I forwarded the screenshots and footage to my attorney with a brief note. They're here without permission. No emotion, no commentary, just documentation. Because once they brought in contracts and clipboards, once they crossed the threshold from manipulation into legality, they changed the game. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about property. This was about control. And what they didn't know was that the moment they involved paperwork, they stopped controlling the outcome. I didn't move from the chair. The soft hum of the ocean outside my glass wall felt distant, like it belonged to another life. My eyes stayed on the screen, still watching the camera feed of the lobby below. My parents hadn't left. 20 minutes had passed. The agent stood stiff, clearly uncomfortable now. The way he kept glancing toward the elevator, then the front desk, told me everything I needed to know. They were expecting cooperation. They were expecting access. But this time, the door wasn't opening. My mother took a seat, crossed one leg over the other, and started tapping her heel against the marble tile. My father stood, arms crossed, lips tight, that familiar look settling into his face. The one he wore when the world didn't bend fast enough. I stayed upstairs, deliberately quiet. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. I didn't reach for it. What I felt wasn't fear. It was stillness. Alert stillness. Controlled. They were unraveling, and I wanted to see what thread they pulled next. 10 more minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From him. You're making this difficult. We can resolve this quietly. Short, measured, vague enough to deny, pointed enough to threaten. I stared at it for a beat, then tapped forward and sent it straight to my attorney. 5 minutes later, she replied, not to me, but to him. I wasn't CC'd. I didn't need to be. I trusted her precision more than I trusted my own restraint. What I do know is what she said to me privately in a separate message. Language clear. I mentioned civil trespass. Evidence captured. Don't engage directly. Outside my door, silence still reigned. Inside the lobby, the tension was growing louder. Back on the feed, I watched the agent pull out his phone, make a quick call, then begin speaking to the concierge. From the brief audio I caught on the feed, he mentioned scheduled access and authorized walkthrough. My father stood closer behind him now, looming. The concierge looked uneasy. She gestured to a clipboard, likely checking visitor logs, then shook her head. They didn't have permission. Not from me, not from management. And yet, they weren't backing off. Instead, the agent pulled something from his folder, a single sheet of paper, held it up, flashed it briefly toward the desk, too fast for the camera to catch clearly. The concierge didn't take it. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't miscommunication. This was escalation. They were trying to bluff their way in, banking on the fact that people don't challenge a confident man in a suit, hoping no one would ask too many questions, hoping I'd stay silent or show up just in time to get pulled into another one of their "let's talk like adults" speeches. But this time, I wasn't playing the quiet one. I opened a new tab, searched for the local sheriff's department, called the non-emergency number. When the woman on the other end answered, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't add emotion. "I'm the property owner at this address," I said calmly. "There are 3 individuals downstairs attempting access without my consent. One is presenting what may be falsified documents. I have video and security logs. This may constitute trespass. She didn't hesitate, took the details, asked if I was in immediate danger. No, I replied, but I need a deputy present before it gets there. We ended the call. I refreshed the feed again. My parents were still there. The agent now pacing near the wall, on the phone again. My mother had stood up. Her arms waved slightly. My father's mouth was moving in that tight, clipped way he reserved for when he thought someone should be afraid of him. But no one was budging. Not this time. I stayed in my chair, watched them, and waited. Because today, they didn't expect the law to be watching too. It took 12 minutes. I know because I counted. The sheriff's cruiser pulled into the circle driveway out front, silent and deliberate. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the steady presence of someone whose job wasn't to negotiate feelings, but enforce facts. The moment the glass doors of the lobby slid open and that uniform stepped inside, the air in the room shifted. You could feel it even through the camera feed. My father stopped mid-sentence, spine stiffening as though someone had yanked a string. My mother's carefully maintained smile faded, just enough to notice. And the agent, poor guy, stepped back half a pace, like the floor might suddenly give way beneath him. This wasn't what they'd planned. The sheriff didn't rush. He didn't ask for drama. He didn't raise a badge or speak like he was used to commanding fear. He just looked at each face with that slow, practiced calm of someone who's had this conversation too many times before. I watched as he stepped closer, asked one question. Who has legal authority to list this property? That was it. No preamble, no bluff. The silence that followed was the longest 4 seconds I've ever counted. The agent's lips parted, but no words came. My father's face turned a shade darker. My mother lowered her eyes, the way she used to when she didn't want to be part of something, but lacked the courage to walk away. That pause did more damage than yelling ever could. A moment later, the concierge quietly handed the sheriff a printed folder. My attorney's documents. Verified ownership, verified access, verified everything. No emotion, just facts. I finally stood from my chair upstairs and made my way down. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. But maybe that was just me, bracing for what I was about to step into. By the time the doors opened, the room had settled into a kind of tense stillness. The kind you get right before a verdict is read. I didn't need to say much. I just approached, nodded politely to the sheriff, and said, "I'm the owner. The documents should match what you've received." He glanced at me, then back at my parents. Understood. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't even relief. It was something quieter, like taking a breath after holding it too long. The agent finally spoke, voice low. "I was told there were permissions, some family arrangement." "Were they written?" the sheriff asked, almost too gently. The man shook his head. "No, sir. That's the only kind that matters today." My father looked like he might speak, open his mouth, maybe argue, maybe push back. But then something in his face cracked, just a little. He turned to me instead. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice too tight, too proud to admit what this meant. We're family. I kept my expression neutral. You should have remembered that before bringing an agent without telling me. My mother reached out to touch my arm. I stepped back, not out of spite, but to set the boundary they never thought I'd draw. He just thought, she started, but couldn't finish. She never could when the situation turned public. The sheriff glanced between us. Do you want to press the trespassing issue? That was the moment I had to choose. Retaliation or resolution? I took a quiet breath and answered, No. I just want them to leave. He nodded, simple and clear, then turned to them. You've been asked to vacate the premises. This is no longer a civil matter. You are now formally advised. The walk toward the door felt slow. Like everything they carried, entitlement, control, years of subtle intimidation, suddenly had weight. And it was heavy. My father's eyes never met mine again. My mother's did, just once, and in them I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, recognition. Like she finally saw me not as the son she could coax or quiet, but as someone she no longer controlled. The sheriff walked them out. The agent didn't speak again. The concierge watched the whole thing with wide, unsure eyes. When the glass doors finally closed behind them, and I was alone again in that lobby, I felt something unexpected. Not pride, not power, just stillness. It was over. A week passed. Not all at once. Not like sand slipping through your fingers. It moved like thick syrup. Slow, deliberate, heavy. And when it settled, I found myself in a kind of silence I hadn't known in years. No calls, no knocks, no surprises. Just quiet. I sat alone on the balcony that evening. The sun had already dipped below the ocean's edge, but the sky still carried that last hue of gold and orange, holding on like a secret. The waves rolled in with their usual rhythm. No louder, no softer. Just there. Consistent. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't bracing for something. There was no argument waiting. No need to defend, to explain, to make myself smaller just to keep the peace. This was peace. And it wasn't empty. It was earned. In the days following the sheriff's visit, nothing came. No apology. No visit. Not even a passive-aggressive email from my brother, which, truth be told, surprised me more than it should have. I didn't chase the silence. I let it come. Some families don't fall apart dramatically. They just pull back, like a tide that never returns. One moment, you're surrounded. The next, you're standing alone, ankle deep in a space that used to be full. It doesn't collapse. It recedes. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, a full 5 days later. I let it ring twice before I answered. It was my mother. Her voice was gentler than usual, like she was trying not to break glass with her tone. "I've been meaning to call," she said, without really saying why. "Things got a little out of hand." I didn't say anything right away. She filled the silence. "Your father, he thought he was doing the right thing. It was all a misunderstanding." That word again. Misunderstanding. It's a convenient shield, soft, harmless, suggests there's no fault, just crossed wires. But what happened wasn't a crossed wire. It was an intentional move, and she knew it. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't correct. I just listened. When she paused, waiting for some sign I'd let her back in, I only said, "I appreciate you calling." And that was it. We both knew it wasn't a bridge repaired. It was a door politely closed and not reopened. Later that night, I stood again by the glass balcony door. Same view, same ocean. But this time, I did something I hadn't done before. I unlocked it, slid it open, let the air in. The breeze wasn't warm. It was honest, clean. It carried no voice, no expectation, no memory, just the sea. And for the first time in a long time, I stepped outside without looking back over my shoulder. I didn't need to wonder what they'd say. I didn't care if they approved. That feeling, that freedom, didn't roar. It whispered. It told me I was no longer the same man who used to answer to their version of me. I kept the home, not because it proved anything, but because I chose it, because it was mine, because I built it piece by piece without asking permission. I kept my name, the one they used like a weapon when I didn't behave the way they wanted. That name became mine again, whole, unshamed. I kept my peace. That quiet that once felt like exile now felt like safety. I kept my right to say no, and to not explain why. And what did I let go? I let go of being the fixer, the one who smoothed over the cracks, kept the holiday dinners civil, made sure the yelling stopped before the neighbors noticed. I let go of the hope that they'd ever see me clearly, that if I just said the right words, they'd finally understand. I let go of that old ache, the one that made me feel like I had to prove my worth to people who'd already made up their minds. It wasn't defeat. It was release. I've learned something in this whole mess, and maybe it's for someone out there who needs to hear it. Maybe not, but I'll say it anyway. If you've ever been called too much or not enough, if they told you to be quiet, to be easy, to be grateful even when it cost you your dignity, if you've spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that keeps moving farther away, you're not alone. You're not the problem. You're not broken. You're just done. Some doors don't close because you're angry. They close because you finally know what you deserve.